Welcome to the December 16th edition of the Locked On Leafs podcast. I'm David Morassutti, joined by Michael Amato as the Toronto Maple Leafs saw a couple of streaks come to an end in New York with the loss to the Rangers. We'll break all that down on today's edition of the Locked On Leafs podcast.
You're Locked On Maple Leafs, your daily podcast on the Toronto Maple Leafs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Leafs podcast, your daily fix for all things Leafs. I'm your host, David Morassutti from Sportsnet. Mike DiStefano is still on vacation. Have no fear, I do have some backup as I am joined by Michael Amato, who is a fantasy hockey expert over at Sportsnet, and he is also the managing editor at GoliePost. So, Michael, I would like to thank you for joining me today and help me break down what was a very weird game in terms of just it wasn't a lot going on, but you felt like this was like almost like a playoff style game between the Leafs and the Rangers. And unfortunately, the Leafs came away with a 3-0 loss in New York. Just a weird game overall.
Yeah, it kind of brought me back to like playoffs past where, opposing teams kind of sit back on the Leafs and try and just sort of force them to the outside, defend a little bit, play sort of a trap. And yeah, it kind of worked tonight. I don't think the Leafs generated a ton, only 23 shots on net. Just kind of a mad game. They didn't get outside of I thought a couple of really good shifts. They didn't really generate a ton, and yeah, it's tough when you're playing a goalie like Shesterkin. He was pretty sharp tonight, so it was going to take a lot to beat him. And yeah, they just didn't generate enough.
We hadn't really seen the Shesterkin of last season really up until this point. Like he's been at a little above league average, but not like last season where he was among the elite goaltenders. Do you feel like this was kind of just a performance that he needed to have, and maybe he rose a little bit more to the occasion playing against Leafs, or is it just or how have you viewed his last few weeks? Do you feel like he's slowly getting back to that goaltender that we know he could be?
Yeah, he is. It's definitely obviously a season where it was going to be tough for him to kind of sustain last year's pace. That was just sort of unsustainable. It was an incredible season. He was always going to come down a bit. But yeah, I think he's been a bit better. I still think there's I don't know if I want to use the word intimidation factor, but I think you could see it tonight in some of the Leaf shooters. Like I thought they were a little bit passive. I thought Nylander passed up a couple of shots in the first period. He tried to sort of force feed Sandin on one, and I think Bunting on another. That's kind of like just gets in your head a little bit, tries to make you get that perfect pass, that perfect goal. And I thought it kind of hurt the Leafs a little bit in that sense. Like maybe they could have just been a little bit more direct and just put some more pucks on net.
Yeah, it did feel like, after what we saw against the Anaheim Ducks, I wasn't expecting the Leafs to have a repeat of that against the Rangers. I was expecting, considering the Rangers are a much better team than Anaheim, that the Leafs were going to have a tougher time generating offense. But it just feels like, in this game, Michael Bunting scores, and the top guys, you mentioned Nylander, like there was a point in the game where he's going in, and they brought it up on the broadcast, where he's got a chance to shoot the puck on net, and he's trying to pass it to Rasmus Sandin. And like, I don't know if it's because of how well Shesterkin was playing that there was a little bit of self-doubt with this team, and they felt like, they had to try to make that extra pass to try to make things a little bit tougher on the goalie. But I mean, considering how William Nylander's been playing the last, this whole season, he shouldn't be looking off any chance to shoot.
No, definitely not. And especially against Shesterkin, I think players can get too cute with him. I think just when you have a scoring chance, just rip it on net, try to get traffic, get rebounds, get tips, just get everything you can, towards the net. And I think it's maybe a little bit of a, obviously it's just one game. They've been on an incredible run here, but I think it's something you've seen from this team in the playoffs a little bit in years past. They have the odd game where they just seem to not be able to generate much. I think Game 7 against the Lightning last year was sort of a similar example. So obviously, I think these are the types of games they kind of want to avoid. Where they just don't have sort of much presence in the offensive zone at all.
Yeah, and these are the types of games that this team is going to have to figure out how to come away on top, right? Face a really good goaltender team, and the Rangers do a really good job of winning those puck battles, not giving you those extra chances. These are the types of games the Leafs are eventually going to have to find a way to win. And look, it's hard to poke too, to be too down on the team that just came off an incredible stretch where they won 15 games, though losing in regulation. But these are the types of games you have to start to learn something from, because they're not all going to be as easy as they've come the last 15 games.
No, absolutely not. And obviously, everyone's sort of measuring this team on what they do in the postseason. And it doesn't really matter how the standings shake out. They're going to play a really good team in the first round. It's still obviously a long way away, but they're going to get in these situations where they're not going to have many opportunities, and they're going to have to find a way to overcome it and put a few in the back of the net, because there's going to be a lot of games like tonight, 2-1 games, tight games, where they're just going to have to find a way to pull those out.
Yeah, they're really going to have to. I look at the goaltending performance of Matt Murray. Not really much. If you look at the 2 goals that were scored on him tonight, not much you can really expect him to do on those. You're not expecting Jimmy Vesey to have that type of effort on that goal that he scored. I know somebody was. I was in a group chat, and a buddy of mine wasn't too thrilled with how TJ Brody defended it. He was clearly trying to pass.
That was a rare one for Brody. Just looked like completely lost sliding on the ice.
Yeah, because you put yourself in a situation where you're gonna block the pass, but the player with the puck, if he's good enough, he can say, okay, you lie down on the ice. I'm just gonna go around you and get a chance in alone on that. That's clearly what happened on that play there, and a lot of people will bring up the fact that at one point, when he was a Leaf, Sheldon Keefe called Jimmy Vesey vanilla in terms of assessing his play. Not much vanilla about his play in this game, let's just say. I think he had a little extra pep in his step against his former team.
Yeah, it seems to always happen against the Leafs. Those former players just find a way to score a key goal.
Yeah, they always find a way, these former Leafs. Let's just say if you put money on Jimmy Vesey to score a goal against the Leafs, you likely came away a little bit richer tonight. I mean, it's almost like a given if you see a former player with a grudge against his former team, especially the Leafs. Put a little dollar or two on it, you'll likely come away on top. It was kind of just one of those types of games for the Leafs. We're gonna break down more of this game and what we'll dive a little bit more into specific parts. Obviously, we haven't done this in a while, the good, bad, and the ugly, because the Leafs have been winning a lot. Usually, we do the 3 stars. Mike and I do. So on the other side, I'm going to ask Michael what he thought was the good, bad, and the ugly of the game. But before we do, I'm going to talk to you about one of our show sponsors, and that is the NHTSA. You're hanging out with a few friends and putting back a few drinks. A few become a few more, and a few become a few too many. As the evening comes to an end and people start to head out, you think of calling for a ride, but then you figure you live nearby, you can make it home okay. It's not a big deal. What are the odds you'll get pulled over anyway? And even so, what's the worst that can happen? Your insurance goes up, you lose your license, you lose your job, you total your car, you kill someone. Everyone knows about the risks of drunk driving. The results are tragic and often deadly. However, that still doesn't stop everyone from getting behind the wheel while under the influence. That's why police officers are out there right now looking for impaired drivers on our roads to save lives. So think you're okay to drive after a few drinks. Think again, play safe, and plan ahead to get a ride. It only takes one mistake to change your life or someone else's forever. Drive sober or get pulled over. All right, I would like to welcome you back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. David Morassutti, joined by Michael Amato, who agreed to help me out here in doing a post-game analysis of the Toronto Maple Leafs losing 3-1 to the New York Rangers. Just a reminder, Locked On Leafs is available wherever you get your podcast from. Make sure you subscribe. Also, make sure you're also subscribed to our YouTube channel. We're continuing our push. We're over 2,300 subscribers. We want to continue to see our numbers go up. So make sure you get yourself notified when a new episode of Locked On Leafs does come out. Unfortunately, in a Leafs loss, we don't get to do the 3 stars of the game. We have to do the good, the bad, and the ugly. And a game like this, it's really tough to find a lot of good when a team loses. I didn't think the Leafs were too bad in this game, but Michael, was there something specific you thought the Leafs did well, or there was something good that came out of this game for this team?
I just thought more the fourth line looked really good again. I thought Holmberg, sort of continued to play really well. Just thought they had the puck in the Rangers end a lot. Zach Aston-Reese had a bunch of chances too. I think he only hit the net on one of them, but I really like this group. Like I think for the longest time, it feels like they've been searching for a fourth line with this team. They've always kind of felt like they've been one player away, or maybe one player that was on the fourth line that shouldn't be in the lineup, just whether it's for cap purposes or some veterans they've had, or even going back to like the sort of Frederick OJ days. Like they just in the Austin Matthews era, they've sort of really struggled to, I think, ice that fourth line that they can trust and put out there, maybe for 10 to 12 minutes a night. And I don't know, maybe this is the makings of it. I don't know if Joey Anderson is a long-term fit there with those two, with Holmberg and Aston-Reese, but I don't know. I've liked what I've seen from them in the last few games.
Yeah, it does help that you have David Camp doing a really good job with Engvall and Kerfoot. I know you want to maybe see a little bit more offense from that trio, but you at least have a fourth line where you can put out a Pontus Holmberg. And as Sheldon Keefe has said about Pontus Holmberg, there's not much you can really critique of his game. He's putting up points when he's getting those opportunities. And yeah, I think the fourth line has looked pretty solid. Zach Aston-Reese, it took him a little bit of time to kind of get his footing in Toronto after he signed. And yeah, I mean, with the injury to Nick Robertson, it's allowed, a Joey Anderson to get his opportunity. As you said, maybe that's something the Leafs could look to upgrade if they feel like they don't have it there with Joey Anderson or Wayne Simmons. But yeah, not a lot of bad you can see from that fourth line. I mean, I've also liked that Michael Bunting continues to put up points,
Yeah, 10 in a row, I think now. 10 games in a row.
10 in a row, contract year. Apologies. And we were a little concerned maybe that Michael Bunting was hitting a bit of that. It's funny because it's a sophomore slump. He's not the technical like definition of a sophomore considering his age and how long he's been playing professional hockey for, but it's good that he's starting to get his offensive chances going, and he's putting them in places that Michael Bunting needs to score at.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And I think the big thing too with him is he's finally kind of, I think, got a foothold again back on that first line. Like there was a while there where he was getting dropped down the lineup. He hadn't scored in a long time, and yeah, you weren't even sure if he was going to be in the top six. And now he's kind of feels like he's really has that spot locked up again on the top line, and he's producing.
I think the best thing is Michael Bunting's at his best when he's not only scoring but he is trying to get on the nerve of the other team. Tonight, Jacob Trouba wasn't exactly too thrilled that Bunting had his stick pinned under his arm, but at the same time, Trouba did what he thought was the right thing, which was let the stick go. Unfortunately, in his attempt to try to get the stick back, Bunting was left open in front of the net, and that's what led to the goal. But yeah, he's the Leafs don't have many guys that will get into the grill of the other team like Michael Bunting does. So he's got to continue to do that. That I think was what makes him more effective as a player, not just getting not just scoring. The Leafs have guys that can score, but they need guys that can do just those other things, and that's what I appreciate more from Bunting's game. And the goals are really just a bonus, in my opinion, with him. And I did pick him up in fantasy, so great time to continue to have him on a tear right now. So I will keep him there as long as he continues to put up points.
Yeah, great run for him for sure.
Great run. Unfortunately, there were some bad from the games. One of them is Timothy Liljegren, who had to leave the game. It was kind of like he didn't, because Timothy Liljegren isn't. I'm not gonna say like a high. Like he's not noticeable because nobody knew he wasn't playing in the game until late in the third period, and because it was like 5 minutes left in the second, he left the game, didn't return. I guess and maybe those who were there weren't really keeping an eye for how long he was out for. But after the game, Sheldon Keefe did say he did have to leave the game with an upper body injury. Luke Fox of Sportsnet did say that he had his right hand wrapped. It's not something you want to see. This defense has been taking some huge hits the last few weeks. They were just starting to get healthy. And now you have another defenseman going down on a road trip. Good thing is that Jordy Ben is waiting in the wings, but Timothy Liljegren has been doing such a great job on that pairing with Rasmus Sandin. That's the last thing you want to see is you lose a top four defenseman, another top four defenseman, especially on the right side where the Leafs don't necessarily have a lot of depth there. So that was for me a bad. With Liljegren going bad, was there anything else you thought was bad from this game, or was that a bad for you?
Yeah, that was bad for me for sure. Just because I think it's going to continue to put more pressure on someone like Mark Giordano, who I think's been incredible this year. Given his age, playing big minutes. But I'm a little worried about how he's going to be looking in March or April on this pace. It would be nice for him to kind of maybe slot back into a pair a little bit lower down the lineup and not have to play over 20 minutes a night. But yeah, this Liljegren injury certainly complicates that. Yeah, the other bad I just sort of mentioned earlier was just I think the passiveness. They didn't look as aggressive. I thought, like I said, Nylander passed up some shots. Even Marner and Matthews, I thought Matthews had like a 2-on-1 in the third period. Normally he would just rip that, and I think he tried to make a backhand pass across and it didn't connect. And Marner had a chance in front too where he was trying to make a couple of moves. I just thought, yeah, in a goalie against a goalie like that, that they might face, a similar situation in the playoffs. You want to see them be just really aggressive and try to, get as many pucks on net as they can.
Yeah, and what really, I mean, if we can move into the ugly was, there was a point in the time where Austin Matthews has a puck in the zone. Connor Timmins is kind of deciding, okay, I'm going to pinch in, trying to help jumpstart the offense. Matthews makes a pass. It goes to nobody but Jimmy Vesey, who picks it up. It's a 2-on-1 and it leads to that goal. Like those types of plays, they just seem to always go against the Leafs. Those, you should be pushing the play forward. Instead, you push it back. The other team's ready to pounce on it. Unfortunately, this one ends up in the back of the net. But yeah, I didn't like the fact that it had to be Jimmy Vesey. Like, let any other player on the Rangers be. Let it be Panarin. Let it be Zibanejad. Let it even be Chris Kreider, who did it the last time the Leafs were in New York. Jimmy Vesey had to be him. Tic Tac Tomar, who I know many follow on Twitter, had to go out. He had to poke. He just had to leave it out there that he didn't think Jimmy Vesey was going to score in this game. Well, guess what, Omar? Not only did he have one goal, but he had 2 goals.
Yeah, it's like death, taxes, and former Leafs scoring against the Leafs. It's always a guarantee. But yeah, I think you're right. Like you notice when they kind of get into these situations where they're struggling to kind of find the back of the net and find offense, they're making that extra pass. And like you said, Matthews, that one just turned it over and led right to the goal.
And him and Tavares had some really good chances in front. There was that one Matthews had. I thought he was gonna tie the game, where he had point blank in front of Shesterkin. He went low, and I'm like, this just doesn't seem like an Austin Matthews chance. Now I think he also felt like should have been a penalty called on that play. But yeah, just a lot of unnecessary, uncharacteristic plays made by the Leafs in this game, and unfortunately, that meant that they did not come away with the win. Neither Shesterkin, he didn't face a lot of shots, but I saw if you looked at the heat map from Natural Stat Trick, a lot of these chances were coming in tight in front of the net. He had to make a lot of big saves, and that's what happens when you go up against a goalie like that. When he's on his game, not really much you can do, but you also have to make it tough on him. And I don't know if the Leafs made it as tough as they could have in this game.
Yeah, that's exactly. I think you could tell pretty quickly that, he wasn't standing on his head tonight, but he was definitely on his game. He was sharp. It was going to take a good shot to beat him. And I think the Leafs kind of felt that and maybe punched their sticks a bit tighter.
Yeah. So the Leafs will have to look and try to rebound when they continue their road trip in Washington. We're going to wrap up just kind of this game in general, and we're going to discuss the upcoming matchup against the Capitals as Alexander Ovechkin looks to get over 800 goals. He did it a couple of days ago. He got 800. Now he's got to try to move past Gordie Howe. We're going to discuss all of that and more. We're just going to take one more quick break here on the Locked On Leafs podcast. Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. David Morassutti here, joined by Michael Amato, who is pinch hitting. I know we're a hockey podcast, but I'm going to use pinch. I like using pinch hitting one in these scenarios. He is pinch hitting for Mike DeStefano, who is on vacation. I should just mute Mike when he's on Instagram and he's on vacation, because every video I'm seeing of him on this cruise is making me wish we were doing Locked On Leafs on a cruise right now and not in my basement in a pretty crappy weather here in Toronto. But luckily, Michael is joining me tonight to help me get through the last episode of Mike's vacation, and he'll be back for the next one. The Washington Capitals, so this game with the Leafs and the Rangers, obviously the offense didn't go their way. They're going to have to rebound against a Washington team that they've been a little bit better. And it's funny enough that it's not Darcy Kemper doing it. He's been out with an injury. Charlie Lindgren has been stepping in with Kemper out. Do you feel like, and actually Washington is coming off a loss to the Dallas Stars, where they were really trying to get Ovechkin to get past the 800 goal mark. He's at 800. They're trying to get him past Gordie Howe. And I'm watching this game and I'm like, Washington, there was just something off about them in this game. Is this a position right now where the Leafs can try to take advantage of some injuries, in the crease for Washington, and maybe Washington trying a little bit too hard to force things to Ovechkin?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think Washington this year doesn't seem as strong as in years past. There's no Backstrom. Kuznetsov's having a bit of a down year compared to last year. And yeah, Kemper's out, but Lindgren's been pretty good. Last week he was really strong. So they're playing a hot goalie. They're also playing, I think the Leafs are going to be facing a team that's sort of still on a bit of an adrenaline rush from the Ovechkin 800, and they're going to try to push for that. So probably not the ideal time to be playing them. But yeah, I don't think there's certainly the Capitals of years past. I think they're more of a one-line team now. Obviously, easier said than done. Slowing down Ovechkin, especially with the injuries the Leafs have on the blue line. But yeah, I think better offensive effort. They should have a great chance to pick up 2 points on Saturday.
And we know that Ilya Samsonov will get the start in Washington. It'll be his first game in Washington since Washington told him we don't need you anymore. And he ends up going to the Leafs and sort of right now resurrecting his career. When you look at the landscape of goaltending around the league, we know what the Leafs, the Leafs, it was a big conversation going into the season. Has Ilya Samsonov, has he outperformed what you were expecting so far this season and what you're seeing from him?
Yeah, I think so. I think with him, it was always sort of a consistency issue. Like he definitely had stretches in Washington where he looked really good, but he's definitely looked, a lot more solid this year for longer. And yeah, I think he's really proven to be a goalie that if you have pretty good structure and a good defensive team in front of him, like the Leafs do this year, he can really excel for you. He hasn't really given up many bad goals this season, and I think that's all the Leafs need, right? Like if they just have somebody back there that the same goes for Matt Murray. I don't think they have to, like post a 930. They just have to give them quality goaltending and don't go on those kind of long stretches that they had that the Leafs had last year with Mrazek and Campbell, where they just couldn't really get a save, right? Like that's the challenging thing. And I think, if Samsung continues to just play steady like he has, doesn't give up any bad goals, I think he'll be fine.
Yeah, and this Leafs tandem, I mean, you're going to eventually at some point have those wondering, will there be a controversy in that net? I don't think there is one right now, because I don't think either one hasn't played enough to establish himself as the clear-cut starter. Yeah, Samsonov has the most recent impressive streak where he got a few shutouts. He went undefeated at home, but he's also been fed some of the easier games, in my opinion. That game against Anaheim, other than the first period, he didn't really face much. But do you feel like at some point there will be this conversation and potential controversy with this tandem?
It's possible. I think now, though, I think the landscape in the NHL is a bit different, where a lot of teams are comfortable really riding two goalies. and just kind of playing the hot hand. And I think, I think we can see how it shakes out. If I think the Leafs want it to be Matt Murray. I think they want him to kind of, be the guy that's playing 2 out of every 3 games, is kind of ramping up come playoff time, and he's gonna take that job. But I don't think it's a bad thing if, Samsonov is pushing Murray, if Samsonov is playing really well too. I mean, I think that's what Toronto sort of envisioned last year with Campbell and Morassutti, and it just never panned out. But I think this is always what Dubas kind of wanted, right? 2 goalies you can kind of, sort of rotate in and out when needed. And I don't think it necessarily, says a lot of who's starting what game or whatnot. I think they might just have a plan of, the workload for each goalie and how much they want to get them in just to keep them sharp.
Yeah, I'm one of those that kind of wants to wait and see what happens going until the end of the year, because yeah, I do think the Leafs wanted to be Matt Murray in the playoffs because he does have that experience. We saw what he did in Pittsburgh. Um, when I look at the fantasy hockey landscape too, when it comes to goaltenders, and you're the perfect person to ask this. This might be one of the toughest years to pick a fantasy hockey goaltender in a draft. Like, I had to start my season, Thatcher Demko and Ville Husso. I was not confident at all with that tandem. And somehow I am in the top 3 in my league, but the cracks are starting to show a little bit with that tandem. Like, how tough has it been analyzing this goaltending fantasy market?
Yeah, it's really challenging. And I think like one of the things we see now in fantasy hockey is this like quote unquote zero goalie strategy that some people use. I use it pretty much every year, where you essentially almost don't draft any goalies until your last couple picks. You take a flyer on a couple of late round people, and then you sort of like shape your goaltending from the waiver wire as you sort of see how the season's shaping up, because it's so hard to predict in September or early October when you're doing your drafts. Like, someone like Pyotr Kochetkov has been phenomenal. You could have plucked him off waivers. Even like Linus Ullmark, like I think after drafts he was available in like half of leagues. Like most people had drafted Jeremy Swayman there, and it completely flipped. Stuart Skinner was another one. That sort of was widely picked up and it is been really good. Spencer Knight, to an extent as well. I think there's just less and less value to drafting goalies high in fantasy. I think there's more value taking skaters and waiting to draft goalies late. Like I can tell you, I drafted 3 goalies and none of them are on my roster anymore. Like I drafted Anton Forsberg because I thought he'd be effective for the first couple months with Talbot out, and he was. And then I took Grubauer and Cal Peterson with my last 2 picks, hoping they'd have a season. They didn't. I ended up grabbing Swayman because somebody dropped him. They got frustrated. I picked up Aiden Hill, who's been great, like one quality start a week, and I grabbed Kochetkov. And I'm doing really well in my league. And I think a lot of people can, kind of follow that strategy. You don't have to necessarily reach too high for goalies because, yeah, like you said, it's so much from year to year. It's such a volatile position. And this year, especially, like we saw Demko, Campbell, even Saros started slow. Markstrom had a tough go of it. Now he's kind of turning around. Tristan Jarry as well. There's just a ton of goalies this year that really struggled at it.
Yeah, and talking about reaching, goaltending is always one where people are like, you got to have that goaltender, otherwise you're not going to win. There's other ways to do it too. But also talking about reaching, I know, it's hard for some fans when they're drafting, they want to have a player from their team on their fantasy hockey league. Some people are going to see right now Connor Timmins on this point streak. He's pretty much been at a point per game player. He's been really good with TJ Brody back. Should we be pumping the brakes? Should we make sure that Leaf fans aren't rushing to the waiver wire or rushing to go and get Connor Timmins in fantasy right now?
Well, I think it depends on your expectations. If you think, Connor Timmins is going to be like Adam Fox, you're going to be disappointed. But hey, they've got a lot of injuries right now. Toronto, he's going to get minutes. He's going to be on the second power play. He's got, I think, 5 points in 4 games. You could always, if you don't have any issues with, ad restrictions of a player, you could always add him for a short term and see what he does over the next week. And, if he starts to fall off, which, when the team gets healthy, I'm sure his ice time is going to go down a bit. You can just drop him. Nothing sort of ventured, nothing gained. But yeah, I don't see him like saving your fantasy hockey season. But yeah, in a short spurt, maybe for a few games, he could have some value.
He could also have value potentially if Timothy Liljegren goes down because,
Yeah.
just generally by the rule of thumb, you have one guy go down, someone else has to step up, and he might be the beneficiary. Michael, I want to thank you for first off spreading your wisdom on fantasy hockey. I don't like to ask people for advice on Twitter usually or DM somebody, but I had to. I was in a bit of a jam. Your advice did help me in a jam, so I do appreciate it. So that's why I wanted to have you on because I owed you, so I do thank you for that. But I want to thank you for helping me subbing in for Mike. It's you did pretty well for your rookie job. And I also want to thank you for helping me through these technical difficulties. We were having some issues in the first segment. I think we were able to expel that in the second segment, but thank you for joining me today.
Yeah, no problem, David. It was fun. Anytime.
Thank you. And so that will do it for us here today on the podcast. I'd like to thank you all for listening and supporting the show. You can subscribe to Locked On Leafs wherever you get your podcast from. Make sure you follow myself on Twitter at @the_Morassutti and follow Michael at Amato_Mike and follow the show at Locked On Leafs. We'll be back with another episode on Monday where Mike should be. If Mike's not back from his vacation, I'm going to have a little chat with him, but he should be back on Monday. We'll break down the game against the Washington Capitals. But until then, keep it locked right here on Locked On Leafs.